I thought it was just another weekend with friends. I didn't know I was about to watch my wife slip away, one slow, excruciating moment at a time. Hey everyone, glad to have you back. Appreciate you tuning in. I've got a fresh story to open up about today. So here goes. For as long as I can remember, I was the steady one in my relationship, the calm in the storm. My name's Brian, and I've always found peace in the little things. A quiet night at home, familiar routines, and evenings that end at a decent hour. Crowded rooms, booming music, wild nights that bleed into the next morning. That just wasn't me. My wife, Jenna, well, she was the total opposite. She thrived on energy and chaos, like she couldn't breathe unless she was the center of everything. She loved being surrounded by people, dressing to impress, and stealing the spotlight with her charm and bold spirit. For 7 years, that contrast between us was somehow what made us work. It was strange, like the very differences that pulled us apart were the same ones that kept us tied together. But lately, I started feeling like those differences weren't just quirky mismatches anymore. They felt like distance, like we were drifting. Then came this invite for a weekend get-together at the house of our old friends, Nick and Emily. Jenna was over the moon when the text came in. Me, not so much. I remembered how those parties used to go. Wild pool scenes, drinks constantly flowing, and people acting way too comfortable with each other. The flirting wasn't subtle. And honestly, it always rubbed me the wrong way. That kind of environment just felt off to me. When I saw the invite, I sighed and looked over at Jenna. I don't know, babe, I said, shaking my head. We've got enough going on right now. Doesn't seem like the right time. But she turned around with that sparkle in her eye and said, come on, Brian. We need this. You've been buried at work, and I've been juggling so many freelance gigs I barely remember what a weekend looks like. This could be a breath of fresh air. Don't you think? She always had this way of spinning things, making her case sound so reasonable, like saying no would be unfair. And the truth is, she hadn't seen Nick and Emily in a long time. Neither of us had. All my friends are going to be there, she said, with that eager tone that made it clear she'd already made up her mind. It's just for a weekend. Come on, what could go wrong? I wanted to push back, but the way she said it, with so much excitement in her voice, made it nearly impossible to argue. Jenna could be incredibly persuasive when she wanted something. I nodded, but in my gut, something didn't sit right. The moment she said the word party, this low, twisting unease settled in my stomach and didn't leave. The day before we were supposed to leave, I caught myself just watching her. Not like I usually did. Not admiringly. More like studying her. And what I saw made that uneasy feeling grow. She was unusually focused on her outfit, but not just her outfit. She spent nearly an hour in front of the mirror, holding up different pieces of lingerie, turning side to side, trying to see how each one hugged her body. It didn't feel like someone getting ready for a casual weekend away. It felt like someone getting ready to perform, or worse, like she was preparing to be hunted, or maybe to do the hunting herself. I kept asking myself, why all this effort? Why so much attention to detail for a cookout and a few drinks by the pool? But Jenna was glowing. She thrived in that kind of excitement, and she seemed genuinely thrilled. She practically sparkled with anticipation, and I could tell she felt alive in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I sat down across from her, sinking into the old armchair with a heavy breath. You do realize this isn't just some friendly little get-together, right? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. You know it's going to be a full-on drinking party. She didn't flinch. She just smiled, soft, knowing, like I was making too big a deal of things. Brian, she said with a gentle laugh, I get it. You're not a big fan of loud music and big crowds. But I promise, we're just going to unwind. I'm not going to do anything you'd be upset about. But as she said it, her lips curled into this little smirk. Not cruel, just dismissive. Like she thought my worry was cute, even a little silly. Still, I couldn't shake the dread. It stuck to me heavy and cold. I kept my eyes on her as she adjusted her bra, checked the lines, made sure everything fit just right. Her movements were slow and deliberate, like she wanted everything to be perfect. And not for me. That much I knew. Maybe she just wanted to be the most beautiful woman at the party. That would have been in line with who she always was. She liked to turn heads, always had. But this time, it felt different. Like she was preparing for something I wasn't a part of. It made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. Still, we packed up and hit the road. Leaving the city behind us, the landscape started to stretch out. The sun was drifting lower in the sky, casting everything in a golden light. The air was warm but not suffocating. By all accounts, it was a beautiful day. But inside, I couldn't ignore the quiet weight pressing down on me. The road that led to Nick and Emily's place was long and winding, snaking through a thick stretch of woods. It felt like we were leaving the real world behind. Their house sat hidden behind a tall wooden fence, secluded and private, almost like it didn't want to be found. As the gate creaked open, I could already hear loud music spilling out from somewhere inside, along with bursts of laughter floating through the trees. Several cars were lined up in the driveway, a mix of luxury and beat-up weekend rides, and it was obvious the party was already in full swing. Nick and Emily greeted us at the door, both flushed and clearly a few drinks in. Their energy was high, almost chaotic, like they were already running on adrenaline and booze. They pulled us inside with open arms, chatting quickly, smiling too much, moving like the night had a head start they were trying to keep up with. We were led into this enormous living room, high ceilings, huge windows, the kind of place that made you feel both impressed and out of place. Just beyond the glass you could see the pool lit up, people already laughing and splashing around, drinks in hand. It was a beautiful setup, but there was something in the air I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first glance, everything seemed relaxed, light, easy, full of that summer night vibe. But as I watched more closely, I started to catch these subtle glances being traded between guests. Lingering eye contact. Half smiles that said more than the words coming out of their mouths. Some folks were already tipsy, hanging by the bar with full glasses. Others disappeared into the pool or wandered off in pairs. And all around me, I noticed how physically casual everyone was, touching arms, brushing shoulders, whispering closely. There were no clear lines between people, and that bothered me. I watched women greet each other with long, warm embraces before heading off together toward the sauna, laughing like they were sharing secrets. The guys, on the other hand, were getting rowdier by the minute. They joked loudly, smacked each other on the backs of their thighs, their voices getting bolder as the drinks kept coming. It wasn't just partying, there was an undertone of something more. Something unspoken but obvious. That's when I noticed Jenna. She was across the room, deep in conversation with a guy I didn't recognize at first. Tall, built, dressed like he knew he looked good. His name, I later learned, was Brandon. Everything about him screamed confidence, maybe too much of it, the kind that borders on arrogance. Brandon was laughing at whatever Jenna was saying, and every few moments he'd reach out, lightly touch her arm, lean in close to whisper something only she could hear. And the way he looked at her? It didn't sit right with me. His gaze wasn't friendly. It wasn't respectful. It was possessive. Like he was already sure of the outcome. That was enough for me. I made my way over, standing beside her to make it clear I wasn't just watching from a distance. Brandon turned slightly, gave me a small nod and a half-smirk that said way more than his words ever could. It felt like he was saying, you can stand there all you want, but it doesn't matter. I've already won. Trying to keep my voice steady, I turned to Jenna. Hey, everything good? Want to step out for a walk, just the two of us? She looked up at me with a soft smile, but there was something off in it. Of course, babe, she said sweetly, but I'm kind of in the middle of a really good conversation with Brandon right now. And just like that, I felt completely invisible. He's just telling me about this new business venture he's working on, Jenna said, flashing me that smile that always seemed to deflect everything uncomfortable. Right then, something shifted inside me, like ice water running through my chest. I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone, but deep down, every part of me was screaming that I needed to get her away from that guy. I swallowed that bitter feeling, clenched my jaw, and forced myself to step back. Instead of pushing it, I walked over to the bar. Poured myself a beer, more for something to do with my hands than for the drink itself. I sat down on a chair near one of the big windows, trying to stay calm, trying to make sense of this strange new version of my world. The party was in full swing by now. People were laughing, shouting over the music, sipping colorful drinks that reeked of rum, gin, tequila, you name it. Some were downing cold punch out of plastic cups. Others were popping bottles of sparkling wine like it was New Year's Eve. Girls in barely their swimsuits were running toward the pool, shrieking and splashing like carefree teenagers. Then someone called them toward the steam room, and without hesitation they took off in that direction. A few minutes later, half-naked men emerged, towels wrapped low around their waists, cheeks flushed from the heat, grinning like they'd just been let in on some big joke. The house felt less like a weekend hangout and more like something out of a dream I wasn't supposed to be in. A surreal, wild one that I didn't want to be part of. Everything was open. The hot tub was bubbling. The billiards room had people taking shots, not just with pool cues either. Even the upstairs bedrooms weren't off limits. Doors open, lights dimmed. There were no lines anymore. Jenna was already on her third drink when I walked over. I kept my voice low, gentle. Hey, I think maybe that's enough for now, I said, trying not to sound controlling. You don't want to overdo it. She rolled her eyes and tilted her head back with a laugh. Brian, seriously? Why do you always have to play dad? I'm here to have fun, that's the whole point of this weekend. Right on cue, Brandon strolled over, drink in hand, and smirked. Come on, Brian, he said with that smug confidence. Let her live a little. That hit me harder than I expected. My hands tightened into fists and my jaw locked. I wanted so badly to tell him to back off, to tell him he was out of line. But instead I stood there saying nothing as Jenna laughed it off. You're always seeing things that aren't there, she added, waving her hand like I was some confused bystander. Her voice was soft but carried that tone, the one that says you're being ridiculous and I'm tired of explaining things to you. It stung more than I can explain. An hour passed. And with every minute the vibe got more indulgent, more reckless. Someone shouted that everyone should head into the steam room. People started peeling off clothes and grabbing towels like it was the most normal thing in the world. I shook my head, the heat had never been my thing, and stayed behind in the living room, nursing a drink and pretending to check my phone. But a few minutes later, something in me said I needed to check in. So I stood up and walked toward the hallway leading to the spa area. That's when I saw them, men wrapped in towels pouring out of the steam room laughing loudly. Their faces were red and glistening, their voices echoing off the tile. And Jenna, she wasn't among them. Right behind the group of men came the women, some still in their swimsuits, others now draped in short silky robes that clung to damp skin. Jenna was among them. Her cheeks were flushed from the steam, and her smile stretched wide, like she was on a high I couldn't understand. She looked in my direction, eyes sweeping the room, but when they landed on me there was nothing. No recognition. No flicker of connection. Just a blank glance, and then she looked away, already laughing at something someone else said. I felt invisible. Next to me stood Julia, the girlfriend of one of the other guests, though I hadn't caught her partner's name. She looked about as out of place as I felt, her arms crossed over her chest, scanning the scene with a furrowed brow. You doing okay? She asked, her voice low, barely audible over the music. I met her eyes and saw the same strain in hers that I was feeling in my gut. Just holding on, I said shortly. Trying to keep my head straight in all this. She nodded, glancing toward the crowd as if she was still trying to understand what was happening. These parties, they didn't used to be like this, she said, stopping halfway through the sentence like she was second-guessing whether to say it at all. They used to be a lot tamer. I gave a tight, polite smile, more out of habit than anything else. She was right. There was something different about this night, like the unspoken rules everyone usually followed had quietly been thrown out the window. And there was Brandon, again, always near Jenna, never more than a few steps behind. Watching. Waiting. Too comfortable. Then someone from the front of the room shouted, loud enough to cut through the music, "Everybody gather around the table." The crowd shifted, laughing and chatting as people started making their way toward the center of the room. I looked at Julia and raised an eyebrow. Is this an actual thing or just some weird prank? She shrugged, uneasy. The music cranked up a little louder, the drinks kept flowing, and more people poured wine, mixed cocktails, opened beer cans like it was the last night on earth. A few women giggled, talking excitedly about some couples contest they'd heard about. Like this was all planned ahead of time, like they came expecting something more than just a weekend hangout. My stomach twisted tighter. Then a voice, I couldn't tell who, called out from somewhere near the table, "How about a little blind partner swap? Just for fun." The room erupted, some people cheering, others laughing nervously. A few voices pushed back, saying it was too much, but others winked and smiled like it was just harmless fun. Someone mentioned they'd need to lay out the rules, and I caught pieces of conversation floating around, talk of slips of paper or closing eyes and drawing names. The official line being tossed around was that it was all innocent. Just lighthearted. No pressure. Flirting. Talking. Nothing had to happen. But I didn't believe that. Not for a second. It was all being framed like a harmless joke, just a bit of silly fun. No pressure. No stakes. Count me out, I said calmly when someone nudged me to join. I tried to keep my tone light like I wasn't bothered, but inside I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Then Jenna turned to me with a playful grin and raised her eyebrows. Wait, what if we just see what it's like? She said, half laughing as if it were nothing serious. Just for fun. What's the harm? Immediately the crowd latched onto it. The energy in the room spiked, voices rising in unison. Come on, Brian. Don't be a buzzkill. Loosen up. It's just a game. For a brief second I wanted to reach out, take her hand and walk right out the door. Just leave. No explanation. Just get her out of there and put an end to this spiraling night. But I knew that dragging her away would only make a scene, and that would make me the bad guy. I'd be the one ruining everyone's good time. I looked at Jenna again, and there was something in her expression that hit me hard. A spark, not of joy but defiance. Like she wanted to push the boundary just to see how far it would stretch before it snapped. Like this was no longer just about fun. My chest tightened. Was she really this naive? Or was she testing something, us, on purpose? I still don't get the point, I muttered, voice low but edged with panic. The dread I'd been holding in all night finally started sinking its claws deeper into me. She leaned in just a bit and repeated, "It's just a joke, Brian. Relax." And then, before I could stop her, she reached forward, smiling, and pulled a slip of paper from a hat someone had passed around. She unfolded it dramatically and with a playful lilt in her voice said, "Oh wow, Brandon. What are the odds?" The way she said his name, slow, teasing, it made my skin crawl. It wasn't just a coincidence. It sounded like she wanted this to happen. Like she was already invested in whatever story the night was about to write. A cold wave of despair rolled over me. I turned to look at Brandon. He was biting his lower lip, grinning from ear to ear like he'd just scratched off a winning lottery ticket. He didn't even fake surprise. Didn't try to hide it. Everything about his expression said this was exactly what he'd been hoping for, or maybe even expecting. Was it luck? Or was it orchestrated? My heart pounded so hard in my chest I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, to stop whatever this was turning into. But I froze, standing there in a room full of cheers and clinking glasses, like I was the only one not in on the joke. "First couple," someone shouted, raising a drink. "All right, rules are rules." The crowd laughed, applauded, already swept up in the momentum of the moment. And Jenna laughed too, but not in the way she usually did. Her laugh sounded sharp, slightly strained, almost like she couldn't believe she was going along with it either. It was the laugh of someone who wasn't sure whether they were in control or being swept away. Then she turned and walked off. And Brandon followed, right on her heels. I watched her go, rooted to the spot like my legs had forgotten how to move. For a moment, Jenna hesitated at the foot of the stairs. She looked like she might turn around, might say something, but then her eyes dropped. She placed her phone on the corner of a table and, without a word, quietly powered it off. That simple gesture hit me harder than I expected. Why would she do that? Why turn off her phone? And more than that, why not say anything to me before disappearing upstairs with another man? I stood there as the noise of the party carried on around me, the music still pulsing, people laughing and chatting, more names being drawn, more partners being announced. Some folks were thrilled, others made nervous jokes about boundaries and relationships, pretending it was all lighthearted. But I didn't see or hear any of it. All I could see was Brandon's broad back as he led Jenna away, and the glint of her hair catching the hallway light before they vanished behind a door upstairs. That image stayed with me. Time slowed to a crawl. I sank onto a couch near the hallway, just sitting there like I didn't know what else to do. My stomach felt like it was filled with wet cement. The game was supposed to last an hour, that's what they'd said. Just an hour. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. After an hour, I finally got up and stepped outside onto the patio, lighting a cigarette even though I hadn't smoked in months. The night air was warm, and somewhere in the distance I heard splashing from the pool, the soft thud of music muffled by the closed windows. Everything seemed too calm for what was going on inside me. When I came back in, I bumped into Julia near the hallway. She looked at me with quiet worry in her eyes. "Hey, where's your wife?" The words caught in my throat. I looked toward the door at the top of the stairs and gave a small nod. "She's with Brandon," I said softly. "It's been over an hour," Julia said, glancing in the same direction, her voice low but cautious. "Maybe they're just talking." "I hope so," I whispered back, but the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Another hour crept by. I tried to play pool just to keep my hands busy, but my mind wasn't in it. I dropped the cue stick and swore under my breath. Nothing could pull me out of the fog that had settled around me. I even picked up Jenna's phone where she'd left it, hoping maybe she'd left a message or set a timer or something, anything. But the screen was blank. Powered down. Cold. My mind started spinning. Maybe it really was just innocent, a joke that went on too long. Maybe they were just talking, catching up, getting a little too wrapped up in the moment. But then again, if that were true, why hadn't she come back? Why had 2 hours passed without a word? People wandered by, still caught up in their own fun, drinks in hand, laughs echoing down the hall. One guy clapped me on the shoulder and chuckled, "How's the game going, man? You look tense." "Don't worry, they'll be back." I gave him a crooked, hollow smile. Something between politeness and disbelief. I couldn't afford to break down. Not here. Not yet. But inside I felt like I was coming undone. He knew exactly how it would look if he said something, like he was just the insecure husband who couldn't handle a harmless party game. Jenna would probably roll her eyes and say something like, "There you go again, Brian?" Blowing things out of proportion. That's how it always went. She'd laugh it off. Make him feel like the fool. But the ache in his chest and the trembling in his hands weren't something he could brush off anymore. At one point he thought he heard something, muffled laughter, a thump against a wall, maybe even the rustle of sheets. Then, a creak, slow and rhythmic like a bed under pressure. And then, a soft sound. A moan? A sob? It was hard to tell. But it sent a bolt of panic straight through him. Was that Jenna? His legs went weak and his vision swam for a moment. He couldn't do it. He couldn't just walk up those stairs and open the door. Not because he didn't want to know, but because he already did. He was terrified of what confirmation would look like. So instead, he slipped away and locked himself in a small guest bathroom down the hall. The silence in that little room was crushing. He stood in front of the mirror, eyes shut tight, trying to steady his breathing. But his thoughts kept spiraling. His pulse thundered in his head. Minutes dragged. Time lost all shape. He didn't cry, not yet. He just stood there, gripping the edge of the sink like it was the only thing holding him up, trying not to collapse under the weight of jealousy, fear, and that awful helpless feeling of being betrayed and unable to stop it. Then there was a soft knock on the bathroom door. Julia's voice came through, barely above a whisper. "Brian, I don't want to upset you, but I think you should know. I heard them. Upstairs, in the back room. The one with the jacuzzi and another bed. I'm sorry. But I'm pretty sure I heard Jenna's voice." He didn't respond. He couldn't. He just stood there, still as stone, while her words cut through him like ice. He didn't want to be that guy, the dramatic husband barging in, yelling, causing a scene. He could already hear how it would play out if he did. He'd be the joke. The jealous wreck. And if nothing was happening, if he was wrong, then he'd never live it down. But deep down he knew he wasn't wrong. And the shame of that knowledge, that she'd gone along with it, that she was up there with another man for this long, it wrapped around him like a cold, invisible shroud. He didn't just feel betrayed. He felt humiliated. The third hour crept by. He found himself standing near one of the large windows in the hallway, watching the party continue like nothing was wrong. People were still mingling, some half-dressed, some completely oblivious. A few disappeared into corners or upstairs rooms of their own. No one seemed concerned. No one seemed to care. Every now and then, Julia would glance his way with quiet concern. But no one dared say what they were all probably thinking, that the game had gone way too far, and no one was stopping it. Then just past the third hour, maybe longer, he couldn't tell anymore, the door at the top of the stairs finally creaked open. Brian turned his head almost like he'd sensed it, and there she was, Jenna, coming down the stairs slowly. Her hair was damp, clinging in strands to her face and neck. Her cheeks were flushed, not from alcohol but something else entirely. Her eyes, they looked dazed, foggy, like she hadn't quite returned to reality yet. She was wearing the same clothes, technically, but her shirt was wrinkled, clinging in places it hadn't earlier, and her bra strap was sliding down her shoulder, completely exposed. And she still hadn't looked at him. Brandon was nowhere in sight. He hadn't come down with her. Probably still up there, waiting, or maybe just avoiding the fallout he knew was coming. Jenna, on the other hand, acted like everything was perfectly normal. "Hey," she said, her voice slightly slurred, her steps uneven as she came down the stairs. There was no remorse in her tone. No explanation, not one that sounded real. "Sorry it took so long. We were just talking, then decided to go for a swim. And my phone died." I didn't say a word at first. Just stood there staring at her. My chest was a storm, rage, heartbreak, jealousy, and this cold, heavy clarity that told me, this was it. Something had broken, and I didn't know if it could be put back together. "You talked for 3 hours?" I asked, my voice so quiet it barely registered over the low hum of music behind me, but every word dropped like a weight. She tried to laugh it off. "Well, then we went in the hot tub. See?" She motioned to her clothes, damp and clinging. "I'm all wet." She attempted a smile, but it faltered halfway through. It wasn't convincing. It looked more like a mask slipping off. "Honestly, Brian, it was nothing. Just a little fun. That's all." But I could barely look at her. Her face was flushed, her pupils blown wide. Whether it was from alcohol, heat, or something else I couldn't say. But she looked altered. Gone. Not present in the way I needed her to be. She reached out, tried to place a hand on my shoulder. Instinct took over and I stepped back. It was a small motion, but it felt like the floor opened between us. Her arm dropped. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and steady. "Let's leave." Her eyes lowered. She nodded. "Yeah, you're right. This is too much. Let's go home." I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. All I said was, "Go pack your bag." We didn't wait for the party to end. As we walked out, Nick called after us from the patio. "Hey guys, leaving already? Come on, stay." But I just gave a small shake of my head. Jenna didn't even look back. Her shoulders were hunched. She moved like someone who'd already accepted whatever was coming. In the car, silence settled between us, thick and suffocating. She opened her mouth a few times, searching for words. Nothing came. Finally she muttered, "Brian, it was just a stupid game." "Really? There's nothing to be upset about. You're overreacting." Her voice trembled. She was trying to sound casual, trying to spin it, but it wasn't working. "We were just talking, laughing, in the hot tub. That's all. What's the big deal?" Her words trailed off as if even she didn't believe them. I didn't turn to look at her. I didn't respond. I kept my eyes on the road, my face still. My hands locked on the steering wheel, because if I let go, I didn't know what I might say. And in that silence, everything between us started to unravel. Inside him, a storm was building. One part rage, one part heartbreak. He wanted to scream at her, "How could you do this to us?" But there was another voice inside him too, quieter, wearier, one that whispered, "What's the point?" Her lies didn't even sting the same way anymore. They just sat there. Heavy. Empty. All he could think was that the damage had already been done. Whatever they had, whatever he had thought they were, it had all been shattered in one long, unspoken night. "Are you mad at me, Brian?" she asked gently, her voice trembling. "Please, just say something." He stayed quiet. They drove through the darkness, the silence between them louder than anything either of them could have said. Then, as they passed back into the city lights, he finally spoke, just one line, barely more than a whisper. "I get it." She turned toward him, confused. "What do you mean? What do you get?" But he didn't answer again. She leaned back in her seat, defeated. She could see it, the wall, the finality. Whatever excuse she might have tried to offer felt useless now. It would just sound pitiful or worse, humiliating. Maybe both. It was past midnight by the time they pulled into the driveway. The house felt colder than usual. Quiet. Unfamiliar. Brian walked straight into the living room and sat on the couch, staring at the blank wall like it held answers. He didn't say a word. Jenna slipped into the bathroom, changed into her pajamas and came back out, hesitating near the hallway. He still wouldn't look at her. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was the night, the drinking, that stupid game. I don't even know what to say." She paused, then added, "I just need a little time too." But Brian didn't respond. He stood up, walked past her and went straight to the bedroom. Closed the door behind him. She sat on the edge of the nightstand, heart pounding, staring at the space he'd just left. "I don't understand," she whispered through the quiet. "Is this just a break? Or is this it?" The bedroom door creaked open. He came out slowly and for the first time that night he looked directly at her. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even sad. They were empty. Hollow. And behind that emptiness was something final. A quiet resolve that said more than any words ever could. He stepped forward and pulled her phone from his jacket pocket, placing it gently beside the half-finished coffee on the table. The screen lit up. A photo. Not clear, slightly blurry, but undeniable. It showed Jenna standing at the door of the upstairs bedroom, a figure beside her. Tall. Mel. Brandon. The door behind them was cracked open. Warm light spilled out from the room, illuminating just enough. She stared at it, frozen. In that moment, maybe she didn't remember everything. Maybe the night had blurred. Maybe she didn't know exactly what had happened, or maybe she did. But as she looked up and met her husband's eyes, she saw something that chilled her to the core. She no longer recognized him. He turned without a word, zipped his bag, slung it over his shoulder and walked down the hallway. And just like that, without shouting, without slamming doors, Brian stepped out of the life they once shared. And he didn't look back. She ran after him, desperation in her steps. "Brian, please wait." Her voice cracked as she reached the front door. "I'm losing my mind. I made a mistake. I know I did. I'm sorry. Please, let's just talk. We can fix this. We can try." Her hands trembled as she reached for his arm. He paused with one hand on the doorknob, turning his head slightly over his shoulder. His eyes met hers, but they were distant, steady, almost peaceful. "I can't," he said softly. Then he stepped outside. Later, as she watched from the window, she saw him return to the house one last time. He got out of his car, saw her standing at the door and walked right past, not a word, not a glance. Like she wasn't even there. Like she was a ghost. Word eventually got back to Nick and Emily, the couple who had hosted the weekend. The guilt hit them fast. They called Jenna several times, their voices shaky, apologizing for their stupid game. But the damage was done. Whatever they thought it was, a bit of adult fun, a joke gone too far, it had wrecked something real. Brandon tried to reach out too. Send a few texts. But Jenna had already blocked his number. What was the point of hearing from the man who had helped tear her life apart? Or maybe, she'd torn it apart herself. That was the question that kept haunting her. Brian meanwhile was calm. Not cold. Not bitter. Just calm, like a man who had walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. He wiped the sweat from his brow one afternoon, ran a hand through his short hair and kept moving forward. There was no sorrow in his expression anymore. Only clarity. Only resolve. Jenna stayed in the house, their house, alone. With each passing day, the silence between them spoke louder than any argument ever could. The calls stopped. The texts ended. And all she was left with was the stillness, and the memories. She'd replay that night over and over. The drinks, the laughter, the heat of the hot tub, the rush of poor judgment, and the moment she chose to follow Brandon up those stairs. Was it alcohol? Was it pressure? Was it just a reckless moment she didn't understand until it was too late? She didn't know anymore. Maybe she never would. But no excuse, no reasoning could undo what had been done. There was no rewind button. No second chance that didn't come with scars. At times she thought about moving out. But she never did. She stayed. Lived among the echoes of a love she once took for granted. And held on to the faintest, most fragile hope that maybe, someday, things might be forgiven. But the silence from Brian answered her more clearly than words ever could. And so, the story came to an end. He started fresh. A new life, a new apartment, a new version of himself in the city. A little more guarded, a little more cautious, but free. And Jenna? She remained in the past, in the house that used to be a home, learning the hardest truth of all. Some mistakes don't come with second chances. Some doors, once closed, never open again.